10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 377. All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 377 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. If you're a new listener, welcome in. And if you've been with us for a while, welcome back. We are doing our tune of the month this month. It is going to be On Green Dolphin Street, one of the most interesting tunes, in my opinion, with the most interesting chord progressions that I know of out there. So we're going to be taking a peek at this. I've written an etude for all the Patreon members, and we'll go from there. So I just mentioned the Patreon members. This is a listener-supported podcast, which means it's people just like you that keep us going and provide us with the support to keep these episodes coming out week in and week out. You can find out how to sign up for that. It's just a small monthly fee. You do get a PDF and audio examples in return for that donation. And you can find it by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, or going to patreon.com and searching for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Wanted to give a quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, David, Aaron, and Larry. Thank you guys so much for choosing to support us. And to everybody over there that has been supporting us for months and years, thank you so much. We could not do this without you. So again, patreon.com, search up the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. You get all the info you need. All right. Let's dive into this week's episode. So as we usually do on our tune of the month, we're going to start by just kind of analyzing the chord changes to this particular tune. And these ones are really interesting. This is one of my favorite set of chord changes out of any of the jazz standards that exist. It's just so interesting and cool sounding. So let's get into that first. So the very first thing is sometimes this tune is played in the key of concert C, and sometimes it's played in the key of concert E flat. Those are the two most common keys. It's one of those tunes that's kind of like Autumn Leaves. It's like depending on who you're playing with, you could either play it in G minor or E minor. And this is one of those tunes too. I have most often played it in the circle of people that I run with in E flat. So that's the key that I'm going to present it to you in today. But just know that you may be called upon to play this tune in the key of C. So it's actually a good idea when you go to learn this to just learn it in both of those keys. That way, kind of your bases are covered, and you'll be able to play it in most situations you find yourself in. The only situation you might find yourself in is playing with a vocalist who does it in a key that's good for their range. But, playing with vocalists is a totally different ball game because you're going to be playing a lot of things in weird keys depending on their range. And there's nothing they can do about that. That's just part of playing with vocalists. Okay, enough of my long preamble. So we're in the key of E flat. This tune is an A, B, A, C form, and it is 32 bars long. Now, a lot of times the rhythm section will split between doing Latin feel, straight eighth feel on the A sections, and then a swing feel on the B and C sections. So also be aware of that. That's something else that kind of makes this tune like really fun to play, is that fact alone, that you get to switch feels. And sometimes they'll keep it going through the solos and sometimes they won't. Sometimes the solos will just be swing all the way through. But that's for you to decide with whoever you play with. Okay, let's dive into the chord changes. Okay, so the A sections, in my opinion, are the most interesting part of this tune because it just does this really cool thing where there's this E flat in the bass that stays for the entire A section. And what we do is we kind of shift around above that, and that provides for a really, really interesting sound. So we start with just a plain old E flat major 7 chord. And then a lot of people will think about this as going to E flat minor 7. And then a lot of other people will think about that as going to concert G flat major 7 over E flat. I think they're both valid. So if you want to think about it either way, that's fine with me. So concert E flat. And then I like to think about concert G flat major 7 over E flat. And And then what we do is we move down to concert F7 over that E flat, which is a really interesting sound. And then concert E major 7 over that E flat, which I think is the most interesting sound. And then we simply come back to a concert E flat major 7. That's our A section. Let's listen to what that all sounds like together. So that's it. That's the A section. Very interesting, isn't it? I love the sound of that. I think that's really what makes the tune what it is. Okay, so B section. What we see first is we see a 2-5 in the key of E flat. And then we shift to the key of G flat concert and we do a 2-5 in that key. And then we do a 2-5 back to E flat. So it's actually pretty simple, but the interesting thing that happens here is that we go from the key of E flat to the key of G flat major, and that's a really, really interesting modulation because if you think about it, it's up a minor third. We're modulating up a minor third. We don't see that too often. Usually we go up a fourth or we go to the relative minor or whatever, but in this case, we go up a minor third. And then we play, which is really cool, and then back to E flat. Okay, so now we come to another A section, which is exactly the same. Okay, then we go into our C section, which is a lot of chord movement. So we start on the 2 chord in E flat major on an F, but then we quickly see that it's doing something else. So what happens is we keep that F minor 7 chord, but we move the bass note down to E flat. So we go F minor over E flat, which is leading us into our D half diminished chord, which is the 2 chord in the key of C minor, which is where we're going. So we have D half diminished to G7 flat 9, and then we go to C minor 7. And then the cool thing is it happens again. So we keep that C minor 7 chord, and then we move the bass note down a whole step to B flat. And then that brings us to an A half diminished chord, which is the 2 in G minor, and the 5 in G minor, D7 flat 9. And then we simply finish up the tune by going 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Back in the key of E flat major. And that's it, okay? But the whole thing together sounds so cool, so check it out. And then we do a 2, 5 to bring us back around to the top. So such a cool set of changes. Like I said, I think this might be one of my favorites of all time. It's just so interesting. And I don't know, it catches your ear in a way that I don't think a lot of other standards do. So that's the chords. Now, what I've done in the etude is obviously first just try to create a musical etude. But second, I want you to think about some of the diminished stuff that we talked about, particularly diminished arpeggios. And what I want you to do is I want you to look for 5 chords in this tune. All right. So in the B and the C section is where we find most of our 2-5 progressions. Well, actually all of our 2-5 progressions. So I want you to go to some of the 5 chords and see if you can find anything that's related to diminished. That's all I'm going to say. Just go and try to find any kind of diminished shapes or chords over the 5 chords in this etude. All right, let's check out the etude. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you found some of those diminished chords. If not, don't worry about it. We're going to keep going over the diminished stuff. But if you did, good job. All right, so no episode next week because there's 5 Fridays in the month of September. That's just happens to be the way that it is. Whenever that happens, we just kind of take the week off. We do 4 episodes a month, and that's a little welcome relief for me when that happens a couple times a year. So we'll actually see you in 2 weeks, and we'll continue our series on the diminished. Hope you're all doing well out there, staying safe and healthy. Remember, you can support this podcast and get the PDF and the audio examples of everything by going to patreon.com and searching for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Have a good one, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.